Greetings, gardeners! Right here behind me is my Satsuma Mandarin, and the air is overpowering with the fragrance of citrus. Um, the Satsuma is a strange tree. It doesn't do things in a normal fruit tree fashion. I've often thought of it as being more like a human being. It's got a personality. It never does anything the same twice. As one year it does one thing, next year it does something else. It's always changing its mind about what's real for it. And it's like 2 years back, we had a beautiful crop on this tree, the best one it's made yet. Then last year, we had the eruption, and a lot of plants failed blooming. I have no idea what the connection between a volcanic eruption and the failure of trees to flower and fruit could be, but it was pretty obvious all throughout the island. I've been hearing stories from people about this, and as I said, I know that the koa trees in the national park, which reliably flower every year, they had almost nothing on them last year after that eruption. Could have been the sulfur in the air. Who knows what it was. But the Satsuma didn't bloom worth a darn last year either. I mean, we had just a small quantity of oranges that came off the tree, and that was all. But it's making up for lost time. The air is almost choking with perfume over here. Check this guy out. And just as an ornamental, it is gorgeous because it's just lit up white. It looks like stars. It's so beautiful. Neat, huh? There's going to be a lot of oranges on this tree this year. Oh, I can't wait. I love my Satsumas. So I've done a number of videos on the Satsuma Mandarin over the years. It's one of my favorite citrus trees, and y'all can look back if you want to, and I've got videos on Satsumas all the way back into California and here in Hawaii. But for those of you who aren't familiar with this tree, Owari Satsuma is actually really not a single tree. There are a lot of different races of this thing, some better than others. I have to admit that I can't tell them apart, but there are a lot of them. They all originate in Japan. They're the type of tangerine that you call it zipper skin. You can stick your thumb in there and go like that, and the thing pops right out. They're also almost completely seedless ordinarily. It's a rare thing, although there was a year in California where during the drought where my Satsuma was loaded with seeds. So go figure. I don't know why it did that, but ordinarily this is a seedless fruit. It segments easily. It's not highly acidic. It's a fairly sweet fruit, real easy to eat. I mean, it's almost like junk food, pops right out, no seeds, pop it in your mouth. Wow, I can go through a half a dozen of them sometimes. They're so easy to eat. So since we're talking about mandarins and tangerines, perhaps I should elaborate. I have had the question for years and years, the confusion over what's a mandarin and what's a tangerine. Okay. They're actually the same thing. Yeah. It's like dog and Fido, it's not like that. Like chicken and cluck. They're just two names for the same thing, although they do somewhat describe a distinction within that fruit. Ordinarily, the ones that get the name tangerine would have been the ones that came to us indirectly through North Africa. Say like the Spanish or the Portuguese, for instance, would have collected mandarins in China, in Japan, brought them to mostly the Catholic missions in northern Africa is where a lot of this stuff ended up. Algeria, of course, the city of Tangiers. Tangiers is why we call it a tangerine. Because so much of this stuff was brought there to Catholic missions, and there was a priest, somewhat famous for those of us who know about tangerines, named Father Clemente. And Father Clemente did a lot of selection and, breeding of those tangerines or mandarins that came in from China. And so the variety Clementine, which is also AKA Algerian, and these days, a cutie. I don't like that name. Okay, that's really messed with things, and I don't like the name at all. But people do like the fruit, and most of the things in a box called a cutie are actually clementines. All right, and so there are a little bit of difference in the ones we call tangerines usually, because the ones that were selected in North Africa seem to be a little more sprightly. There's a little more acidity in them. They usually have more aroma. Okay, the ones that came to us directly out of China and Japan into the U.S., like the Satsuma, all right, tend to be more mild and not as aromatic, although they're all, slip-skin type, segmenting type fruits, and they're all sort of related in this big mass of things that we call tangerines and mandarins. But the names are synonymous. You can use them either way, although we seldom call a Satsuma a tangerine. We usually call it a mandarin, and we almost never call a clementine a mandarin, even though it is. We usually call it a tangerine. So now that that's clarified. As far as Owari Satsuma goes over here, though, aside from being a tree that has an unusual personality, almost people-like, it reminds me of some of my ex-girlfriends. I can never figure out what it's doing. And so it's an odd one. It's not typical of most of the mandarins or tangerines in the way it acts. But it will grow further north than most sweet oranges. I mean, there's a good-sized old grove in the town of Redding, California, for instance, and it's 50 years old, all right? It's been around a long time. And they're all Satsumas, is what the guy's grandpa had planted years ago. Farm's still in business, and on the old trees, the fruit that comes off of Satsuma trees that are over 50 years old, it's just completely to die for. This is a plant that will make fruit first or second year you put it in the ground. They're precocious. They will pop out some oranges for you real quick. But they're not really all that good for the first 5 or 6 years. They kind of fluctuate. It's normal that one year you'll get small, tight-skinned fruit that's sprightly. The next year you'll get big, kind of bland fruit that has very puffy skins. That kind of goes back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, somewhere around the 10th year, you end up maybe with the puffy ones high in the tree and the tight ones low in the tree. Eventually, everything equalizes, and by the time you get out about 20 years or so, the trees are very stable and tend to act about the same every year. And the fruit starts to get really good by that point. And unfortunately, this causes a problem because people will know somebody who has an old Satsuma, and they will taste the fruit from it, and the fruit is incredibly good. And they'll come to me in a nursery, and they'll say, "Bill, I need this fruit." And I'll look at it and go, yeah, it looks like a Satsuma. Oh no, we buy Satsumas in the market. It's not that. It's better than that. Well, because the Satsumas you get in the market are like 10 to 15-year-old trees. They don't grow trees in the groves for 50 years ordinarily. And so it's very difficult to match. A lot of citrus will do this. The navel orange is like that. Old navel oranges have fruit that's incredible. Young navel oranges, they're all right. So this is a hardy tree. It is capable of producing outstanding fruit, but you really do have to put in your time if you're waiting for the top-notch stuff. So if you're looking to grow Satsumas, plant them now. This tree I planted while I was living in California, knowing that and knowing how much I liked them. As soon as we built the house, I put this tree in next to it over here. And so it's now starting to reach age, and I'm retired, and I've got my oranges coming now. It's really starting to get to that point where it's going to do good. I'm so happy that I put it in like about 10 years ago, I believe, is how old this tree is now. It did well. Nice, big, fat, happy tree. I apparently have got the right amount of fertilizer underneath there. Things are doing well. The tree seems to really love growing here. So, cold hardy. Might be able to grow it in places where you couldn't grow any other orange. Easy to peel. No seeds. I don't know what. Not too tall. The Satsuma tends to grow sideways. Satsuma's back to full bloom over here, starting to act normal after the eruption last year, and I'm just tickled pink. Orange? Yeah, tickled orange, because I love my Satsumas. Aloha, y'all have a wonderful garden season this year, and don't let your Satsumas hang loose.